trying to fix people doesn't fix the relationship. It just fixes us into a role we were never meant to play. Most of us don't set out thinking, hey, I'd love to spend my life patching up someone else's chaos. But maybe we grew up learning that love means rescuing, or we believed that if we could hold everything together, we'd finally be enough or worthy or loved back in the way we long for. The problem is, being the fixer isn't an act of love. It's an act of fear, wearing the mask of love. And while fear might keep the peace for a while, it never builds the connection we really crave. Here's what I've learned. Through research, through messy personal experience, and through listening to countless people share their hearts, escaping the fixer role isn't about becoming colder, harder, or less compassionate. It's about daring to love without losing ourselves. This might sound simple, but it's anything but easy. Most of us spend years, sometimes decades, trying to fix people we love. And when someone points it out, our first instinct is to defend the person. But you don't understand, they've been through so much. Or if I don't step in, who will? We get so wrapped up in protecting them that we forget to ask the more honest question. What am I protecting myself from? I've seen this over and over in my own life, in interviews and in the research. We think we're naming the problem when we say, he just can't get it together, or she always needs help. But that keeps the focus outside of us. It keeps us safely on the sidelines, telling ourselves the story that the problem is their messiness, their crisis, their inconsistency. And maybe that story has a grain of truth, but it completely skips over the deeper truth, that we stepped into the role of fixer because at some point it felt safer than stepping back. Naming the pattern means turning the mirror on ourselves and asking, when did this start? When did love become a job description? When did being needed feel more secure than being truly seen? Those are vulnerable questions, and they rarely have tidy answers. For some of us, it goes all the way back to childhood. Maybe we were the oldest kid in a family that ran on crisis. Maybe we learned to keep the peace by solving everyone else's problems before they exploded. Or maybe it was quieter than that. Maybe we just absorbed the belief that our value came from usefulness rather than presence. And here's what's wild about human nature. Even when the fixer role feels exhausting, it still feels familiar. Familiarity can feel safer than freedom, because freedom means stepping out of a role that once made us feel important or worthy or loved. It means risking that people might not choose us if we're no longer fixing them. That risk can feel terrifying, but it's the only path back to real connection. See, when we name the pattern, we finally separate who they are from how we've chosen to relate to them. We stop making their crisis our identity. We begin to see them as whole, flawed humans, not projects to manage. And we see ourselves as whole, flawed humans too, not managers of other people's lives. Now, this doesn't mean we stop caring. It doesn't mean we don't show up. It means we stop confusing love with control. We start asking better questions. What's mine to carry and what isn't? What does support look like if I'm not trying to fix? And maybe most important of all, who am I beyond this role? Because until we see the pattern and have the courage to name it out loud, we stay trapped in the same dance, hoping for different music. And the truth is, the dance doesn't change until we do. And that brings us to something that's even harder to accept, but so important: understanding what fixing really costs. Here's something we rarely talk about out loud. Being the fixer feels good until it doesn't. It starts with this quiet sense of purpose. They need me, I can help, maybe I can keep this from falling apart. And for a while, it works. We pour ourselves into other people's crises, patch their wounds, smooth over the chaos. We convince ourselves that without us, everything would come undone. But what we don't often see, at least not until we're exhausted or resentful or both, is the hidden cost of living this way. Research and stories I've heard for years all point to the same truth. Chronic rescuers often live with a steady undercurrent of anxiety, shame, and even loneliness. Because when our value is tied to being indispensable, we're constantly scanning for what needs fixing. And let's be honest, there's always something to fix. Over time, this pattern drains us emotionally, physically, spiritually. We might notice we're always tired, that there's a simmering resentment we try to swallow down. We think, why can't they just get it together? But underneath that is often a quieter whisper. If they do get it together, will they still need me? And if they don't need me, will they still want me? That question is painful to admit because it makes us confront the truth that fixing wasn't only about them, it was also about us, about our fear of being unneeded, unseen, or unloved. And the cost isn't just the exhaustion, it's the slow erosion of trust and intimacy. When we constantly step into rescue, we unintentionally send the message, I don't trust you to handle this. And over time, the people we love start to believe it too. What's worse, we rob them of the very thing we say we want for them, growth. Struggle isn't comfortable to watch, but it's necessary. When we always cushion the fall, we keep them from building the resilience and self-trust that only come from facing hard things themselves. And if we're honest, we also keep ourselves from the vulnerability of watching someone we love make choices we wouldn't make and loving them anyway. And here's the hardest cost to name. When our identity is wrapped around being the fixer, our relationships become conditional. We may not realize it, but love starts to sound like, I'll be here for you as long as you keep needing me. And deep down, that's not the love we want to give or to receive. So understanding the cost isn't about shaming ourselves for trying to help. It's about gently asking, what am I really afraid of? If I step back, what would it look like to love this person without making their healing my responsibility? Because when we see the cost clearly, we open the door to something better. A kind of love that isn't rooted in fear, but in trust and respect. And that trust begins to grow when we learn to replace rescuing with something much healthier. Boundaries. When I first started really learning about boundaries, I'll be honest, part of me hated it. It sounded cold, harsh, almost selfish. And I remember thinking, but if I stop stepping in, isn't that the same as abandoning the people I care about? What I didn't understand then is something I've come to believe deeply now. Boundaries aren't the opposite of love. They're what make real love possible. Rescuing might look like care on the surface, but it's built on fear. Fear of what will happen if we don't fix it, fear of conflict, fear of not being needed. Boundaries, on the other hand, are built on clarity and respect for ourselves and for the other person. One of the biggest shifts is this. Rescuing says, I'm responsible for your feelings, choices, and outcomes. Boundaries say, I'm responsible for my feelings, choices, and outcomes, and you're responsible for yours. And it sounds so simple, but living it can feel excruciating at first, because stepping back doesn't mean we stop loving. It means we stop over-functioning. It means we choose to trust that the people we care about have the capacity to face their own struggles, even if they stumble along the way. It means saying things like, I love you and I can't keep covering for you at work, or I'm here to listen, but I won't solve this for you. And yes, sometimes it means walking away from conversations or situations that consistently cross our boundaries. Here's what's important. Boundaries aren't punishment. They're not about controlling others. They're about protecting our own well-being and making healthy connection possible. When we set a boundary, we're saying, this is what's okay for me, and this is what isn't. And that kind of clarity is actually a gift. It removes the guesswork, the hidden resentment, and the silent scorekeeping that happens when we're stuck in the fixer role. And research shows something fascinating. People who set and keep healthy boundaries aren't less compassionate. They're often more compassionate. Why? Because their care comes from a genuine place, not from burnout, guilt, or fear. They don't need to fix everything, so the love they offer feels lighter, freer, and more honest. Of course, boundaries don't guarantee that the other person will respond well. Sometimes they get angry, guilt trip us, or double down on their chaos. But remember, how someone reacts to your boundary tells you about them. It doesn't mean your boundary was wrong. Holding the line kindly but firmly can feel uncomfortable But over time, it teaches both you and them something powerful, that love and responsibility can coexist without sacrifice. And maybe the biggest gift is this: when we replace rescuing with boundaries, we also get to see who people truly are, and they get to see us. Not as someone who exists only to fix them, but as a whole human being worthy of love and respect. And that brings us face to face with the next deeply human challenge: embracing the discomfort of imperfection. If I had to name one thing that keeps us locked in the fixer role, it's this: our deep, aching intolerance for seeing the people we love struggle. We tell ourselves it's compassion, and sometimes it is, but often, if we dig a little deeper, what we find is fear. Fear that their failure might reflect on us, fear that their pain might be too much for us to witness, or fear that if we don't help, they'll stop loving us. The truth is, it feels safer to step in than to sit still. Rescuing can feel like control, and control can feel like protection. But love, real, wholehearted love, isn't control. Love asks us to be with, not to do for. And that's messy. It means we have to watch people we care about make choices we wouldn't make, sometimes choices that hurt them, and resist the urge to jump in and rewrite the ending. I've learned this the hard way, and it still challenges me, because embracing imperfection isn't a one-time decision. It's something we practice over and over again. And it starts with this simple but hard truth: struggle is not the enemy. Struggle is often the soil where growth takes root. When we constantly intervene to spare someone pain, we might also spare them the lesson, the resilience, the strength they could have discovered on the other side. Think about it. Some of the most defining moments of your own life probably came from places of disappointment, heartbreak, or failure. And while we'd never wish those moments on the people we love, denying them the experience denies them the chance to learn who they really are. And it denies us the chance to truly know them too, to see them rise on their own terms, not ours. It's vulnerable work, this stepping back, because it means accepting that we can't guarantee someone else's safety, success, or happiness, no matter how much we care. It means our hearts might break as we watch them stumble. But that's what love sometimes requires: the courage to let go of our scripts for other people's lives. And here's what's even harder: we have to embrace our own imperfection too. The fixer role often comes with this hidden belief: if I can keep everyone else okay, maybe I won't have to look at my own mess. But when we step back, we're left with our own doubts, grief, and flaws, and that can feel overwhelming. Yet it's also where real connection begins, when we show up as our full, imperfect selves, not as the constant savior. So embracing imperfection is an act of trust. Trust in the resilience of the people we love, and trust that we're enough, even when we're not holding everything together. It invites us to move from fear to faith, not blind faith that everything will work out perfectly, but faith that we and the people we care about can handle the messy, beautiful, unfinished business of being human. And when we dare to sit in that discomfort, when we stop editing everyone else's story, we create space for a deeper truth: that love was never about perfection in the first place. And that leads us to perhaps the most tender and transformative work of all: rewriting our story about worthiness. This is the part most of us try to skip, not because we don't care, but because it feels so raw, so close to the bone. And yet, every time I talk with people who've spent years stuck in the fixer role, the same quiet confession surfaces sooner or later. If I'm not fixing, what am I good for? That question isn't about the other person at all. It's about us. It's about the story we've been telling ourselves, sometimes for as long as we can remember. My worth depends on what I do for others. And if we stop doing, we fear the answer to the question, am I enough? Might be no. I've seen this story take root in countless ways. Maybe we grew up in a family where love felt conditional, where praise came when we performed, soothed, or solved someone else's problems. Or maybe it was quieter, a parent who leaned too heavily on us emotionally, teaching us without words that being useful was safer than just being ourselves. The truth is, the fixer role isn't born out of malice. It's born out of longing. We long to feel valuable, to feel seen, to feel indispensable. But over time, that longing hardens into a belief that our usefulness is our only ticket to love. And that belief costs us dearly because it keeps us hustling for worthiness in places where it was never meant to be earned. And here's what I've come to believe, both through research and through my own messy life. Worthiness isn't something we achieve by constantly proving, solving, or rescuing. Worthiness is something we remember. It's a truth that lives underneath the fear and the noise. I am enough even if I'm not fixing. I am enough even if they don't change. I am enough simply because I exist. Rewriting that story doesn't mean we stop caring about others. It means we start including ourselves in that care. We ask, what would it look like to show up from a place of love, not fear? What would it feel like to support someone without making their healing the evidence of my worth? This isn't about arrogance or indifference. It's about grounded self-acceptance, the kind that lets us say, I love you and I love me too. And I don't have to sacrifice one for the other. And here's what happens, almost quietly, when we start living from that place. Our relationships change. We connect not through obligation or desperation, but through honesty and presence. We stop managing other people's lives and start inviting them to walk beside us as equals, not projects. And we discover that real intimacy isn't built on dependence. It's built on two imperfect people daring to show up as they truly are. So yes, rewriting your story about worthiness is the hardest work. It's also the most liberating, because when we know deep down that we're enough, we no longer need to be the fixer to feel loved. We can finally step out of the role we were never meant to play and into the kind of connection that doesn't require us to rescue anyone, including ourselves. So here's where it all comes together. Escaping the fixer role isn't really about them at all. It's about us. It's about having the courage to step out of a story that says, love is something we earn by rescuing, managing, or sacrificing ourselves. It's about daring to believe that we can love deeply without losing ourselves completely. We start by naming the pattern so we can finally see it for what it is, not destiny, just a habit we learned somewhere along the way. We face the cost of fixing not to punish ourselves, but to honor the truth of what it's taken from us and from the people we love. We replace rescuing with boundaries, because real love can't breathe without honesty and respect. We choose to sit in the discomfort of imperfection, trusting that struggle shapes us far more honestly than constant protection ever could. And most of all, we rewrite the story we tell ourselves about worthiness so that love becomes a gift we give and receive freely, not a job we perform until we collapse. This work is messy, imperfect, and it won't happen all at once, but it's worth it. Because what waits on the other side isn't cold distance or disconnection. It's the warmth of being truly seen and truly seeing the people we love, not as projects to fix, but as whole, flawed, beautiful human beings. And maybe for the first time, we get to include ourselves in that same circle of compassion. So wherever you are on this path, whether you're just beginning to notice the pattern or you're deep in the work of setting boundaries and letting go, know this: you are enough. Right here, right now. Good luck. And may you have the courage to step out of the fixer's shadow and into the light of real connection.